Course of mental doctrine.
So what's new? Anything? Not very excited. There you have it. I was gonna say, you had to go to Q. How's that project going? There's something. Well, I think it is. That would be. It's not a bad place for one Now, are you doing more cool stuff than that? I saw that, that's why it prompted me to ask the question. Okay. Absolutely. Well, you know, you can only do so much, you can only talk so much, and there's so much reason.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Morgan County Board of Commissioners meeting for May 18. If you would please stand with me for the pledge and then remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please bow with me? Father God, we're incredibly grateful to gather here this evening, most notably that we're able to gather here freely and that we're able to gather here to participate in what is truly the most representative form of government, our local government that decides the direction and makes decisions for our home. And we're incredibly grateful to call Morgan County our home and to be able to work here and live here and recreate here as well. We thank you for the many blessings that we have as citizens of this great county, and we pray that the decisions that we make tonight will be beneficial to its furtherance, and that we would be good stewards of all that you've provided us. Thank you for your protection in so many ways during a very challenging time in our nation. It's been a challenging time in our nation as well as our community as well. And we're thankful for those that have risen to the occasion to stand on the front lines, from our Board of Health to our 911 dispatchers, to the sheriff deputies and EMS workers, and so many others that every day have worked to keep us safe and to educate us on how to stay safe or to become healthy again. We thank you for each and every one of them, and we ask that you continue to watch over them. We ask all of these things in your name. Our first order of business is just kind of a standing update on current status of county operations, and unless a commissioner would like to entertain a different direction, we've largely spelled that out at our previous meeting. Those that have attended in the past or have watched on live stream will know that at our last meeting, we were armed with probably more information, arguably, than we've ever had thus far in the process. We had the state of Indiana's detailed reopening plan, and we set in on a date of opening our county administration building on June 1st. So our department heads are in the middle now of beginning to transition from a part-time, perhaps limited office staff to ramping up to full-time staffing over the next couple of weeks so that we can open our doors on June 1st. We've also taken additional steps in providing PPE for employees, as well as installing sneeze guards in our public-facing counter areas so that we can make both our employees and our visitors as comfortable as possible as they begin to come back into the building on June 1st. Any changes to contemplate or adjustments that the board would like to present? We'll move on to our grant application, which involves the Morton County Sheriff, Mr. Rich Myers.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the grant that you have before you, I think you have a copy of it. There's one that we apply for every year. This is the Comprehensive Highway Traffic Safety Grant, and it's kind of been combined this year, all of the grants themselves. As for our grant total amount of $75,000, and that period would be from 10/1/2020 to 9/30/2021. The TRIP grant consists of multiple traffic safety programs in which the Morton County Traffic Safety Partnership has participated in the past. Two programs we plan to participate are Click It to Live It, formerly known as the Operation Pullover, and the DUI Task Force grant. The Traffic Safety Partnership will include the Morton County Sheriff's Office, Martinsville Police Department, Martinsville Police Department, and Columbia Police Department. This year we're also considering the addition of the Brooklyn Police Department and the Morgantown Police Department. The breakdown for money will be as follows: $40,000 for Click It to Live It enforcement, $40,000 for DUI, and $5,000 for administration. They'll be split evenly throughout the blitz periods. Those dates are recommended by the ICJI. And the task force funds will be distributed evenly amongst all officers participating in enforcement. And the task force will plan some special events for officers to work at during this time. Also, those high DUI events that happen during this time, we'll have officers out on their overtime hours to do that. So this is all during the hours of 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for the DUI. I appreciate your looking into this and answer any questions you have.
Any questions of the sheriff?
I'll make a motion that we allow the Morton County Sheriff Office to apply for the TRIP grant in the amount of $75,000.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Boyles to approve the grant request. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you very much.
And I understand you're gonna stay put for a couple of
Yeah, I
items.
hope this one goes that easy.
We'll move into an event waiver request on a mass gathering, which will then be followed or perhaps enjoined with a discussion on the mass gathering ordinance in its entirety. So you want to kind of give us a recap of the correspondence that you've had that's led us here?
Yeah, let me give you a little background on this. When I first came in office, shortly after I received a letter to the office of the sheriff discussing this very event that happened on St. John Road in Fulton County. The individual living next to there had some concerns about how it happened, so I researched the mass gathering. It had already taken place. It was done. But I researched our mass gathering ordinance at that time and found it to be, unfortunately, it was outdated. The last update in 1982 had a lot of provisions in it that were outdated and hadn't been looked into. So at that time, we checked into updating that and didn't follow anybody, administration changes and changes and other things. It kind of got dropped, I think, by the wayside and was never looked into or updated. Fast forward to now, again, it's when we have the event out there on St. John Road, the same individual, the same group. So I looked into this again, and this individual, Mike Brown with IXCR Racing, has been very, very forthcoming with what's happening and how it's going to happen. He has a proposed plan that I've given to you, commissioners, there on how he's going to handle this with the COVID-19. He has checked with the Indiana State Police. They're kind of the speaking and liaison between events, racetracks, special events and things, and the governor's office on how to handle these type of events and what stage they fall into. Apparently, Lieutenant DeLello from the Indiana State Police spoke with Mr. Brown and feels that his event will fall into the stage 3, which is the time that he's going to do this from May 30th and 31st. The reason he feels that it's a stage 3 because it's not more of a stadium setting or a baseball field setting or anything where they're going to be closed. It's a track right up on 300 acres. It's going to be 50-foot wide places that these motorcycle racing and four-wheelers. They're going to be coming in, getting checked as they come in. They go do their racing and then they leave. They're not going to stop at the finish line. They're not going to have any kind of celebration. It's almost kind of like the NASCAR race that you saw yesterday, perhaps. You know, there's not any fluff and stuff to it. You come and do your thing and you're gone. He has been very forthcoming about the numbers because, as you well know, our 500 number is for the ordinance that we have right now. If it's under if it's under 500, you have to apply for the ordinance. I questioned Mr. Brown, he checked with the director, he said, no, we're probably gonna be above that. I'm gonna be honest, what do we need to do? So he's been very, very forthcoming and wanting to do everything that's right to do this. The problem is, he's probably not gonna have enough time to get this done with our old ordinance. I know, Mr. Wesco is looking into updating our ordinance and changing some things about it. And I guess one of the questions that I want to bring to the commissioners is, do we want to proceed with that, with adopting the new ordinance? Do you want to abandon the ordinance and take it on a case-by-case basis? Or what's your feelings on this, and what's your feelings on Mr. Brown's request to do this May 30th and 31st? And again, this would hinge also, the last time I spoke to Mr. Brown, with the excise police, because the excise police is the law enforcement arm of the governor's mandates. So they've got to give the okay to this fall under that type of stage 3 also for him to go ahead and continue with that. And he's good with that, and I know he's checking with them to see what kind of status it is on that. But as far as our concerned, what's your feelings on that, how we do this? And I know this is probably not going to be the only one that we have to come forward here. This is a pretty popular event. Like I said, all of my dealings I've had with him, he's been very forthcoming and bent over backwards to help us out on any questions that we have.
Open it up for questions or discussion from the board. As the sheriff's pointed out, we have two issues that are somewhat certainly related. One being what to do with this particular event. that is imminent, and then what to do going forward with just the concept of the mass gathering ordinance. So would entertain any thoughts or discussion on either or both of those.
As far as my 2 cents, as far as the event that's already scheduled, and they've already been working with the state on that, I don't have a bit of a problem doing the event waiver request now. As far as the math gathering discussion, no, I definitely think we need to do it, we need to update it, because that is Otis the Hills, Rich, I know that. I definitely agree that it shouldn't fall on the sheriff's responsibility. It should be whoever's hosting the event, so I don't have a problem with that. My only thing is, I don't wanna see it get really massive restriction to where day, and it's just totally out of line. I'd rather see a nice common sense ordinance, but we do need to update it and let it fall on them being responsible for doing the things.
Absolutely, I agree, Commissioner Hale. I think we need to streamline it, and make it, the responsibility of the person requesting that to do, the request for the appointed places that they need to go. And we can discuss that, where you want them to go and how you want them to do that, and, their expertise on those incidents and where they go out, and, who they ultimately answer to for that, and any punishment that, if they don't do that, whatever we wanna do. We can do that at a later date, though. I absolutely agree.
I think we need to update our ordinance before we, grant any waivers.
Well, I know, I think you received that letter from that same gentleman last year, correct?
I'm sorry.
You received that letter from that same gentleman last year that I did?
We all,
Good to have.
Y'all did, okay, yeah. And that was my concern that got this started, so, you know, it's gonna be up to you folks. Like I said, he said he would do whatever you said. He's totally complying. He's not wanting to cause any trouble at all. Like I said, he's just, done everything that I've asked him to do to show me what's gonna happen, and, the police, and this may be a null and void question if he finds out something from excise, but I wanted to come before you and see, if it all possible, if it could happen at your discretion.
my big thing is, I mean, to me, I understand this guy's complained, we've had numerous complaints over the years. I mean, nothing was done with the one on, Low Gap last year, nothing was done on the one on Vickery last year, nothing was done on this one last year. So I mean, to me, we need to be consistent, that's my big thing.
Right.
And, I don't have a problem updating the ordinance, but as long as it's common sense and we put that responsibility on them instead of you or the department heads, I don't think it ought to be on us. I think it ought to be on them. But I think at this time, I mean, it's, I don't have a bit of problem with all that they've done, already going through the state, excise police and state police. I don't have a problem going ahead and doing a waiver right now myself. That's just my 2 cents.
I've encountered 2 of these since I've been in office, and the only complaint I got was the one gentleman that you all got the letter on, and I did also. There was another one last year also that, went off without a hitch. We checked on it every day. We got our deputies up there, told them they need to call us, let us know, and no problem whatsoever. They even had live music, and, everything went off
Well,
fine.
see, that's the one in Monrovia, right? See, that was another one in the county, but not in our jurisdictions.
It was kinda in the buffer zone.
It's
so
in the buffer zone,
those
absolutely.
folks, I felt sorry for them too, because they kinda got run around
Yeah.
again, on, no, you need to go here, you need to go there, and, they ended up in a pickle again with, the time frame, which seems to hurt a lot of folks on this, their ordinance.
Yeah, if you count that one in their buffer zone, I mean, that was 4 last year. And I mean, and these series, they're doing it all across the state, all across the Midwest, I know this. I mean, you go online and see what their series are running, so.
Yeah, and they're doing it in a lot of counties, close to us.
Go ahead, Jim.
For my part, Brian, it's hard to address the one without the other as far as the specific request in the ordinance at large. I think that certainly Sheriff Myers had raised to me some time ago, regarding looking at this and reviewing this ordinance, and having done so, discussed it with you, Josh, clearly, I think it was adopted in 1980, some of the language is certainly, dated and it needs updated, for a number of reasons. And for instance, it contemplates a requirement for telephone lines that probably wouldn't be necessary right now. However, and also I think importantly for sheriff, applicant, and everybody involved, streamlining the process in such a way that, I mean, as it stands, it's incredibly cumbersome to do, and that needs to be improved. I have found a couple good starting points about how to do that, and what's done in other places. I'd also point out that the current Indiana code that this comes from is 5,000 people, and also says for 18 consecutive hours or more, has several other differences worth contemplating in this. So I would certainly agree to kind of start the process, and hopefully that's something that we can do soon, if that's what commissioners think we need to do. As far as the specific request, I mean, it certainly seems like they have, not only done their due diligence, but probably gone above and beyond as far as communicating with you, the state, and anybody else they need to, and been forthcoming with everything they have planned. It would seem to me that they certainly, what they have planned and done, what they've done in the past, certainly seems to me to meet the spirit of the purpose of the ordinance, which is public safety, and that they have, I think, complied with the purpose. That being said, I would think that the options are to nonetheless enforce the ordinance as it stands, and therefore they can be subject to a fine or some public nuisance action, or to take no action, or to grant them a waiver, which in large part I think is warranted. On the other hand, I would have some concern about a consistent application, and concern that similarly situated people who may think they didn't get that benefit and so forth, and or if there were a problem there. So I think that the authority to proceed with the waiver exists, but I'd have that concern.
Thank you, Jim. I mean, I agree with most or all of the comments that have been made, probably all of them. Our county geography is one that lends itself to these types of events, and so they're not going away, and you've experienced a few in your short term so far. I have as well, and we've had a couple of different county attorneys during that period of time, and it's been talked about but not really pursued, and it probably is time to clean up the language, both for some of the older terminology that's referenced, and also probably the size, because there are arguably, we think about the BMX bike races or the dirt bike races, but there are probably other events that are occurring that unknowingly don't meet the spirit of the ordinance as it exists today. And so to take time to evaluate that and update it, and then make sure it's enforced in a consistent manner makes a lot of sense to me. As far as the timing of this one, I wouldn't be as sympathetic if it wasn't demonstrated that they had taken a lot of steps to be conscientious and safe and methodical in planning, and it seems like they've done that due diligence. And if we don't do something today, they could have a timeliness situation, because I think the event is the 31st.
30th and 31st. And Mr. Brown said he's gonna do your wishes. He's not gonna do anything that you guys don't approve, by any means. Again, that was his request. I have this request, and I'll bring it up to you at the same time that we talked about that, but he's gonna abide by what the commissioners say now. So.
Well, I think there's definitely a consensus to move forward on updating an ordinance, and it sounds like that is already underway, and that we probably should direct some specific feedback to Mr. Lisco. As far as the event waiver itself, that's probably something that actually needs to have a vote today, to Mr. Lisco's point, either to do nothing or to act definitively one way or the other. So, are there any further questions or discussion that board members would like to make?
The only other thing I'm gonna make a comment on, if you look at the numbers that Mr. Brown submitted, I mean, you had 443 people out there on Sunday, right? You had 409 out there on Saturday, evidently, with a grand total of 852. So, I mean, by the ordinance, they don't even meet the 500.
Well, I think, to be totally honest, if he was totally honest with you too, Mr. Hell, I think that says riders. So if he has 449 riders,
So that's riders only?
I believe, read that, is that what that says?
Well, that's just hard to believe that have that many, oh, it does say riders.
Yeah, so to be totally honest with you,
That's a
there could be
lot
an
of
upward of
riders.
around 1,000 people if you had 2 people watching the rider. And that's what he was being totally honest to say, no, we're not gonna be under that.
Yeah. That just blows me away, it does say riders.
Yeah,
That's a lot of riders.
it's a very popular series.
I have gotten complaints every year from neighbors and other folks, not necessarily in writing, but got calls.
On just this one, Norman?
On all of them.
All of them.
So as far as the matter on granting a waiver or being silent on that, which would result then in the applicant just following the normal application process, what are the wishes of the board? As I mentioned earlier, I think there is a consensus to update the ordinance. However, it doesn't solve the issue that we have over the next 2 years.
Maybe Cheryl can answer this one for Mr. Brown. If he does not get the waiver, is he not gonna go ahead with this event? Is that what it sounds like to you?
No, I don't think so. I think it probably could come at a later date. Again, it's all, this is what he told me, it's all, playing on across the field. Because I think part of this riding track, / area is on, Mr. Lee's fields,
Oh, yeah.
that he has, so depends on when he gets those planted and what part of that. So that was his answer to what I asked him that also. But he said they would try if they could at a later date.
There are no further comments or discussion. I'd entertain a motion on the event waiver request for the event that is planned for what appears to be May 30 and May 31.
Go ahead and make a motion, we approve the event waiver request,
There's a motion.
Michael Brown.
There's a motion on the floor to approve a waiver of the parades and public demonstration ordinance for the event as outlined by Mr. Brown. I will second that motion. I will second it largely on the grounds of the effort and due diligence that's been made thus far. Any other comments or discussion from the board? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, same sign. And motion carries 2-1. And I think, unless I get another direction from the board on the second item of the ordinance discussion, I think we are in agreement to move forward with the draft.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be glad to work with all of you on And I'll keep you advised too of what Mr. Brown learns from excise.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you very much.
On the motion to move forward, looking at the ordinance, is it, I guess, agreement from you all that we're placing the onus on the individual and taking that away from the sheriff's office in the new ordinance?
That's what I support.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we tend to agree on the size of the event may be somewhat antiquated. Some of the language in the ordinance is antiquated. And then the complexity of compliance is kind of there. Not suggesting it should be straightforward and easy, but it's pretty cumbersome. So I think that those are kind of the three main areas of concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
We'll move into our property and liability insurance renewal, and Mr. Josh Messmer has an update on that for us.
Yes. Thank you, Ryan. So the big takeaway is our insurance is going up around 11.5%. That's around $90,000. While that sounds bad and high, it isn't quite as bad as it seems. For a couple reasons. I had a conversation walking through this with Mr. McConnell on Friday. He likes to get this kind of information to us sooner than normal, but because of coronavirus, some of the carriers have been not as timely in getting back with them. But we have increased our coverage in buildings, contents, and structures by $1.5 million. Our mobile equipment has increased $1.1 million. Our vehicles have increased by 11, but the biggest increase, he said, really comes down to our EMS. We now have that service fully up and running, which hasn't been captured in past years. And he said that has really increased our liability. To the tune, most of the liability, auto, and umbrella coverage is where we saw almost all of our increase. We saw some of our coverages go down. Some of our smaller coverages under excess building structures and contents coverage went down a few $100. A few only increased by 1,000 or less. But the big ones had to do with our liability. And so I also asked Steve if this is a wider trend, and he said yes, it is a wider trend that we're seeing around the nation. And so he has recommended that we continue with Travelers, at least for the year. We may want to consider shopping it around next year. We are recommending to do a change in our cyber coverage. That saw a very large increase. It was nearly 50%. We have an updated quote in here, our updated price in the summary sheet for you of $13,529. So it was around a $100 increase to switch providers. Steve attributed that to there's been quite a few cybersecurity related events that Travelers has been stuck covering, and he feels that was a knee-jerk reaction on their part, and so he recommended we switch that coverage in particular. So that's kind of an overall summary. We would like approval from you all to go ahead and have Steve work to renew this coverage unless the board would like to take a different direction.
Thank you, Josh. I could bore you guys to tears with commentary on this particular subject, and I will spare you that most unfortunate occurrence, but we did a very diligent effort with our broker a couple of years, well, no, it was just last year, to look at the market as it relates to public entities, and there are very few options that we have at our disposal, and that's even more true for counties due to the jail exposure that we have. And I know the previous administration at the Sheriff's Department, as well as the current one, has been overwhelmingly pleased with the way that Travelers has handled some of the liability issues that arise out of the jail. And I know the board is also aware of the way they've handled a pretty significant auto liability issue that we've had as well. And to Josh's point and to Steve as well, the insurance market is changing against the buyer and more in favor of the insurance company just due to the current market conditions. So, I mean, there's nothing here that it seems abnormal, and this would not be the year, really, after the effort that was made last year to look at other options to turn and run, especially as we're adjudicating a couple of large liability claims.
And to that point, Ryan, and I'm sure you can elaborate on this further, Mr. McConnell did say if we start jumping ship every year, that becomes a problem for us to get good coverage in the future. And I will say that a number of times I've called Travelers to talk about some of the cases we have going, and I've been extremely pleased with the amount of information and diligence they put into some of our cases.
So we have, it sounds like Travelers is our insurer for all of the property and liability, auto, umbrella, workers' comp. The change in this proposal, though, would be that the cyber liability would change to Chubb.
That's correct.
And then the flood coverage, as far as that goes, and that's been a real moving target between the jail and other highway garage, other properties that are within certain floodplains. What was his recommendation on that part?
We have a new company because our original provider, we're no longer willing to cover it. I don't have off the top of my head what the name of that firm was, but it did change in premium for the highway department by a little over $125.
In our favor, though. Is that right?
What's that?
In our favor.
No, it went up by about $125. For the coverage for the highway department.
Okay, I see. So those would remain with Access, Selective, and One Beacon? Is that your understanding?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Other questions or discussion?
Yet, that'll be forthcoming at a later time.
If there aren't any further questions, I entertain a motion, and we need to give direction to Mr. McConnell on our renewal, regardless of the board's interest in looking at other options or not. So if there are no further questions, I entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion that we let Josh go ahead and work with Steve and try to get finalized with renewal for June 1st of 2020 up to May 30th of 2021 with Travelers, with the exception being the cyber coverage for Chum, as well as the flood coverage that's outlined as presented.
Only just a point of clarification on that motion, the new policy term would need to begin on May 30th.
May 30th of 2020 to May 30th of 2021. Sorry about that.
There's a motion on the floor to work with Steve McConnell on the renewal here for the policy term of May 30, 2020 through May 30, 2021 with Travelers and Chubb, as outlined in our discussion here this evening. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next, we have our annual operational report of the Morgan County Highway Department. Mr. Tony will give us an update on 2019 expenditures.
Evening, gentlemen. So, in front of you should have a copy of the 2019 annual report that was produced last week. And we need to file this with the state by June 1st. So we would like your signatures. I think we sent this to you, updated, approved after review last Friday for the weekend. So this has been reviewed by the auditor, and he does agree with it. He has made corrections, and those are included in this annual report. So we would request a motion to sign the annual report for us to submit prior to our next commission meeting.
Any questions of Mr. Hinkle on the report?
Make a motion that we approve the report as presented.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the report and sign it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor of the motion to adopt, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you, Tony, and the ladies let them know as well, and also Dan, so appreciate it.
Great, next point.
Did you want to stay up here?
Well, I think we can come back to the next point. I'm gonna start that one off.
On the appropriations?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
So for the appropriation letter, additional appropriation letters, you should have in front of you one of them, that is, what we had talked about in the last meeting regarding Old State Road 67, by Bethany. We will be trying to get this in front of the council, at their next council meeting to discuss it. I am going to discuss the needs prior to that council meeting with, all of the county council members over this coming week, so they are aware of what we're trying to do. So this request would be to ask for an additional $220,000 to cover expenses that will be incurred to reconstruct the road in that area. So I would request a motion to sign this so that we can present that to the county council.
So as Tony mentioned, this was the project he brought to our attention at the last meeting. Any questions on the additional appropriation letter? Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to go ahead and give Tony the blessing to take to the county council additional appropriation in the amount of $220,000 as outlined on the different fund options for the council.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the additional in the amount of $220,000. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. And then you have a second one.
So is that Stone?
Yes.
Okay. So there's actually two additional discussion right now, but this one right now is the stone that is going to be just moved from one pot of money, I think 1176 to 1173. Was that what it was? I didn't have that one in front of me. I think that was just that one.
Yeah, so I'll give a little background. Tony and I and Karen had some extensive conversations with Dan on Friday and again today. Dan is recommending that the money for our stone come out of our NVH restricted fund. So he's requesting that we do an additional appropriation from 1176 NVH to 1173 NVH restricted, and we will not spend that money out of local road and street where it is currently residing, but we will come back at another time and want to transfer that money to a different item.
So that kind of leads to the second point that we're going to bring up on this too. It is currently sitting in local road and street, so we would have to move it into the MVH. That's not, okay. There is a line item there for the local road and street, but we won't be paying from the, okay. Yes.
So this helps us with our 50% restriction
Yes.
on preservation and maintenance.
Yes, this is material that can be used for that.
It's a really good idea.
So right now, it's simply changing the pot of money for where the money's coming from.
Yes.
So, but we don't have a line item to hold still in MVH restricted, which is why we're asking for the additional, so that it can be, and to be advertised in time for today, so.
Any questions of the board?
You're right, it's just a money shift, but we gotta do additional because it's going into the MBH restricted.
That's correct, it's already money allocated in
Yes.
one fund, it's.
Yes. I'm good.
Hearing no questions, I entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we go ahead and move the money for stone purchase out of 1176 Local Road and Street into 1173 MVH restricted funds.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the appropriation which would move our MVH money, or excuse me, local road and street money into an MVH restricted fund. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
No, and I think then the last point then, that is not an actual letter in front of you yet, but doesn't have the utmost urgency right now, so we'll bring it back to you at a later date, is related to the funding that we will be short some from the COVID-19 because we won't be collecting some of the sales tax. So we are expecting lower revenues. We did get May's receipt. It was down in LRS and MVH, overall I think about 15%. So not a small chunk. We do expect it to be greater when it is the 15% because that was essentially a month in arrears. So we were getting March and May. So we do expect our June distribution to be even less than that. However, we work with Dan. He's shifted the numbers. We are coming up with that number of what we're going to come to ask for to shift from the MVH to restricted. Do that. So we'll come in with another appropriation letter, but this is for your awareness that at the next meeting, we will have an additional appropriation letter to cover essentially the shortfall that we're going to see.
Just a little bit of clarity. Tony did a nice job of explaining what's going on there. We will work with Dan and Jim to draft an ordinance because one of the ways around this is Dan is recommending that we do a one-time change in our distribution, and that will have to be done by ordinance. So we will be shifting the percentage, if you guys agree, that goes from the MVH regular to the MVH restricted.
And in doing this, we do have the monies available. It should not affect what our actual allocation for this year for vehicles, paving, any kind of work that we're priorly scheduled to do in our budget. It should not reduce our budget allocation.
Any further questions on that? I think it's quite possible could very well be our most hampered fund going forward.
Absolutely. However, I think with the money that we do have in reserve that has been, I don't want to say unspent, but kept in previous years, we do have quite a bit of cushion. And we've talked about it with Dan. I think we can still do quite a bit, which I'll actually talk about as I come back up here later on in old business when we talk about paving. So I'll address that with things now. Okay.
Any other questions for Tony? Okay, on the topic of additional appropriations, we also have 4 others. I'll read each of those briefly, and then the board can determine if you want to act individually or just collectively on those. The first non-highway additional is in partnership with EMA, EMS, and the Board of Health, and it is in the amount of $100,000. We would advertise through a variety of different funds, and that would be for the creation of a PPE stockpile fund for use in the future. We also have one in the amount of $102,000 that would be used to install ultraviolet light ionization kits in the air ducts in our public buildings. A third would provide the funding to hire a third staff member in our IT department for the balance of the year. And the fourth in the amount of $32,463 is to purchase, or to consider the purchase of audio and visual streaming equipment, both camera and other software that would wire our devices into a better streaming system so that we can do a more effective job of broadcasting the Commissioners' Council, Plan Commission, and other public meetings that do occur here in this room in the future. So just a quick run view. Some of these things, for example, the IT person is something that we've been discussing this year pre-pandemic. Obviously, the other three have been brought to the forefront due to the pandemic. So entertain a motion individually or in entirety after any questions are dealt with.
Motion to send all 4 of them to the council.
We have a motion on the floor to approve all 4 appropriation letters and forward to the council. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. On transfers, we have a little bit lighter load. 2 transfers. One that was anticipated in the amount of $41,406. This moves money that was already appropriated for our copier purchase. And then the second item is from the maintenance department on the transfer of $5,000. Entertain a motion on those.
So move on both the motions as stated.
Motion on the floor to approve both of the transfer requests. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next item on the agenda, we have a letter from the Fair Board to the Morgan County Commissioners, and I'll turn it over to Josh for additional discussion on that topic.
Thank you. Recently, I guess it's not been so recently, everything starts to run together now. I believe it was back in February, March, you all approved the assessment of our space needs with DLZ. Part of that, one of the members of the executive committee had come to me in the past and inquired about the possibility of Purdue Extension going out to the fairgrounds. As part of that, once we move forward with DLZ, I asked, would you just be willing to put that into a letter so that everybody knows that this was something that the Fair Board had discussed and not any kind of thing that commissioners would try and ram down anyone's throat. And so they have provided you that letter. This is not any kind of decision. This is simply something we want to make sure that everybody was aware. When we started looking at the DLZ study, if you're all inclined, that an option on the table will be to move the Purdue Extension Office to the fairgrounds in some capacity or to some other space. I've talked with Rena about this, she's aware. She indicated she really enjoys the space they're in, but recognized that most Purdue Extension offices are on the county fairgrounds. And so this is really just an FYI that the Fair Board is interested in this conversation and willing to participate. I'm more than happy to try and answer any questions I can, but there's no action needed from you all at this time.
Thank you, Josh. And to his point, it's more of a FYI and just transparency issue that we all recognize that space is becoming tight within the administration building. And when those things start to happen and more growth is really only imminent, you have to start making plans. And all options are on the table, but one reasonable option that comes to mind pretty quickly is just simply having the 4-H extension office at the fairgrounds, which, as Josh indicated, is a pretty common structure. We do have an obligation to provide them space. That is a duty that we do have. However, it does not need to be in our administration building or courthouse. And again, it's just an FYI that conversation is occurring. As we continue to look at our space needs, we didn't want that to be a secret or hidden from anybody, and just wanted that out on the table. Any discussion or thoughts on that particular issue?
I just know the previous conversations I've had with the staff up there, I know not all of them was ever wanting to go out there, I do know that, but I do know Johnson County, I've been over there to their fairgrounds, with Brian Baird showing me all that, and I know several other fairgrounds do have them on their fairgrounds, but I just know some of them upstairs definitely didn't wanna go out there, I know that. I'm leaving it at that.
Understand. If there are no other comments, we'll move on to the AT&T easement. We've had a request from AT&T on an easement at the Morgan County Fairgrounds on 2 of our parcels. And I'll turn that over to either Josh or Jim to provide some commentary on the language that they've presented to us.
I'll give a brief intro and then turn it back over to Jim. We've seen these before. This is another I-69 relocation. AT&T needed to put in some lines. Even though we leased the fairgrounds to the Fair Board, we still own that property. And so they approached us for an easement. They put together an offer. They've given us a letter with survey exhibit. I'll let Jim address the legal side of it, but I don't have any concerns with this in particular.
That's correct. I had been in communication back and forth with Mr. Hewitt, getting the survey as well as the offer that's on the letterhead, and making a couple what are technical revisions to the proposed easement. I would note that there's been a couple different versions of that, and
They have the one that you sent me this afternoon. Yes.
okay, so with that in mind, I would don't have any issue with it.
Any questions of Jim or Josh on the proposal on the 2 parcels? They have offered us an amount of $4,715, which is at essentially a discounted rate of 25% of property value due to the fact that the components will be buried and not overhead. Any questions or discussion from the board? Not hearing any, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion to approve has been made by Mr. Boyles. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next item on the agenda is approval of the stop loss insurance contract on our health insurance program. And this received a conditional approval from the insurance board last week.
Yeah. So we put that on there in the event that we may have already had the contract in place. We don't have that back from the carrier yet, but like Ryan said, we did have a conditional approval. The authority was given to Dan to sign the application. That has all been submitted. As soon as I have further documentation that requires action from this body, I will bring that before you.
So we'll pick that back up when the necessary paperwork is ready, which brings us to old business, first of which is our 2020, the first installment of our 2020 paving program.
Okay, so you should have in front of you the award letters and notice of proceeds for E&B and Wallace. They, after review, they did win all of the projects. These do not include anything in District 1 for District 1's request for now. So those letters do represent everything in Districts 2 and 3. I would like permission to sign those and get those out to the contractors so they can begin work. Wallace had actually went out and did some prep work on Romine on last Tuesday. I told them they actually didn't have notice to proceed yet. They were aware of that, they were at risk, they understood that, they only worked that one day and then moved on, but they're waiting for this letter then so they can get going. So I would request a motion for my ability to sign those and get those released out to the contractors.
I'd like to make a, correction on the ENB paving one.
Okay.
At the end of the, first line, where it says bid by your organization, in, districts 2 and 3,
Okay.
so there's no, confusion about it.
Understood. ENB had won all of those in District 1, and I've had conversations with Keith, and he is fully aware. That's why there's a second list. The second page of it is actually the bid award that will be attached, that is attached to it, that doesn't show anything in District 1. But I will add that line in that before I sign it.
With that, I would move that we, approve, Tony signing these and sending them to the contractors.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the award letters to ENB Paving and Wallace Construction as a result of our bid opening. That motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
Appreciate that. With that, I would like to discuss the plan going forward for the rest of this year and next. So in our budget conversations that we've had with Dan and Josh, the county administrator, we have been planning for 4 other projects, one being the old State Road 67 that we talked about previously that we'll go to the council for. The other 3 projects, one of each one of the commissioners have recommended that we initially went through community crossings for. That project is Cramertown Loop, Townsend Road, Doyle's Road is one project, Smoky Row Road is another project, and Wilbur Road is a third project. All 3 of those won't be overlay projects, they will actually be a road reconstruction because they are pretty severely deteriorated road. Cramertown especially, with it being a major bypass when they close down 69. So this week, later this week, early next week, you should see what the advertisement for bid I want to put out will be, so you'll have a chance to review it. And then the next time I'm here, June 1st, I would like then that permission to advertise for those projects. It will be hopefully for all 4 projects that we'll be advertising for. With the expectation that we'll be opening those bids early July or that middle July meeting of the commission. With that said, we are currently spending with District 1 $2.2 million of the $2.6 million that we have budgeted for this year. So we have $400,000 roughly in contract paving in our budget. We also have another line item for miscellaneous paving, another contract paving line item that has about $375,000 in it. We plan to spend about $150,000 of that on, again, miscellaneous paving. So there is some additional monies in that fund as well. It's about $225,000 left in that. So between that, those 2 funds, there is $675,000 roughly just to pave the other 3 projects, not including State Road 67, not including those. That money's there. With that said, if we did need additional money, there is about $650,000 in lit that has funds for bridges that we're not going to do this year. We're going to put those out for RFP to get those designed and go the LPA route. And if we don't get those, then down the road, we'll look at redoing some of those bridge structures. So we have a little over $1 million that we could make available for paving, which is far exceeding what we need for these 3 roads coming forward. But again, we'll have all the numbers to the commissioner. We'll let you guys all see exactly what that plan is going forward. We've had several conversations with INDOT over the last week and a half. They have made a couple more changes to community crossings. The new change now is that you cannot award a project with community crossings money until you receive the award of the community crossings money. So anything that we wanted to use for this year to apply for the next round of community crossing grant, we wouldn't be able to award anything until middle of October, roughly. That's when the next round is going to be. And there's not much time between the middle of October and November to actually pave. The clarification that I got from the question that I asked, you can have $2 million in community crossings money available to you. You are restricted to $1 million in a fiscal year, in a calendar year essentially. So we can apply in July to get awarded 2020 CCMG 2020-2, the second call. We can apply for that and get monies in October. We then have 18 months to spend that. It does not affect us getting monies if we apply in February to be awarded in April. With that said then, what I need from you guys is, what do you guys want for 2021? Because I do expect to be sitting on $2 million in matching funds with $2 million to be spent. So $4 million in paving for next year for 2021. So nothing now. I'm going to give you my input as well and what myself and the highway superintendent believe we could look at for next year. But with the bids that we have out now, the projects that I was addressing earlier, we have the money in the budget, is my belief, without opening a bid for the next three projects. We have money in the budget to cover it in-house. Next year we'll have about $4 million with $2 million in community crossing funds. And we can spend it all next year, and there's no limit on it. And then after that, we should be on a cyclical. If we get community crossings in February. With that being said, what that means then is we will be needing additional roads and input from the commissioners earlier in the year, about 6 months prior to that year starting. So that July, August timeframe is when we would need your input. Obviously, we got late this year because of my start date, but we want the input from you as well, from the highway superintendent, middle of the year roughly, so that we can apply for that first one and come February.
Have you ever seen, Tony, a community get awarded back-to-back community crossing grants, though?
Absolutely.
You have?
There is precedent for that to happen, and I have talked to 3 different people at NDOT, and they see no problem with it. There has definitely been awarded in excess of $1 million
In a calendar?
well, not in a calendar year,
Well,
but in back-to-back community crossing. What's been happening is most grants, most counties are applying at that first one, using it that next year for paving. So they don't necessarily apply in the second one. So the second calling is usually a little bit smaller. That's how counties have been doing it. However, it is not unheard of for them to get a couple. And you can go twice in a year, and then they do use it for that next year. But it does not stop. Having money out from the community crossing does not prevent you from having more. You can have up to $2 million out to spend in separate calendar years. If that $1 million is awarded in separate calendar years. So that's the plan going forward for next year. I do plan to have about 7 LPA projects that I would like to go after. So with matching funds from what our budget looks like for the next couple of years, for our capital improvement plan, that can still all be built into the budget. But next year would actually be a reduced amount of money from us for paving, but a much larger amount of money overall with $2 million in community crossing funds. So that's my plan going forward, just to keep you guys in the loop. Actually, I think that covers everything else. If you have any questions for me, and I'll be back up here a little bit later to talk transfer agreement.
That presupposes that we were successfully awarded 2 back-to-back community crossing cycles.
It does. I have, again, in my conversations, I've been very diligent in discussing several different aspects of it. they do not see a reduction in what they will award overall amounts for community crossings, even with the reduction they're gonna get in the vehicle tax. They don't see them reducing the amount of awards this year or next year. They may in future years, depending on how the next year budget cycle. But that's what they're looking at, is not a reduction in that. What they do expect is a reduction in counties applying for it.
Right, exactly.
Because they don't have the financial backing, the financial commitment, which opens up the door for us who are sitting in a very good financial state relative to other places to get that matching.
And you had some either very small counties or cities and towns that were awarded a dollar figure that was almost more than the road inventory that they had to resurface. And those folks aren't applying again for the foreseeable future because there's no more work to do. So, okay, any other questions of Tony on the plan going forward for the remainder of this year and first part of next year? We'll go ahead and have you just stay for the transfer agreement.
So, we did reach out, myself and the county administrator, we did have our meeting with NDOT to discuss the questions in opposition to taking in those additional roads and the bridges. They were, first off, very appreciative of the aerial and graphics that we gave them. They never had that either, and it actually brought to their attention that that is not what they were wanting to do anyway. That the roads coming off of the exit ramps and meeting halfway on Liberty Church Road, that was not what they had intended anyway. Their protocol and what they were looking at was that it should stop right there at that transition point where it leaves the access road. So instead of where we wanted to head out further away from the interstate, they want to actually bring it in closer. That's what they normally do. So first off, they recognize that they do need to update the exhibits. We vocalized though where we would like ours to start, and what we were looking at taking in, and the objection to bridges. It is now at their court. They're having internal discussions and seeing what they can do, what they want to do, and how they want to proceed, as well as trying to update the exhibits. So I do expect some back and forth with guidance from the commissioners on how we want to push and how we want to fight for not taking those in. Granted, we do understand that we're not going to lift up snow blades or plow snow through those areas. We're still going to do what we need to do to make roads safe and traversable for the public. It will come down to mileage, paving, and what we end up doing in the long term on how we pave roads. So I would like to see what they come back with their updated exhibits and what they want to see, and then I can bring that to you, the council, when we have an update.
Do you expect another update before June 1, or just kind of, I mean, this has been going on a long time, so.
I think
I'm just curious of what you think we'll see.
I don't think so before July, to be honest. I think they have their fiscal year closing, they've got several other things going on. I know that they're closing accounts and their focus is in other places. My guess would be July.
Okay. Any questions for Tony on the transfer agreement? Well, thank you to the board for bringing up the points that you did, and for Tony and Josh for continuing to track those down. Appreciate the update. Appointment for Monroe Township Fire District. I'm not aware of any action that's ready to be taken on that. Justice Center reporter times expense tracking. I don't believe there's anything there, but I could be wrong.
Since our last meeting, there's no change to the Justice Center costs. I just updated the date and reprinted it for you for the COVID-19 expense summary. We've gone for, already put a letter before you guys to go to the council at the next meeting to ask for an additional $50,000 for the COVID line item. We initially set out 100, we're at 112 in terms of expenses right now, so that next 50 will be necessary. There's, since our last meeting, We spent a little over $32,000 in what is called the Commissioner's line item, but that's also has elections and maintenance in there. I figured it was easier than giving every single person a line. But Stephanie had to expend quite a bit of money to get ready for voting by mail and everything. So a big chunk of that $32,000 has been for Stephanie's office. We are seeing the spending slow down pretty significantly though, otherwise.
Any questions for Josh on either the 60 South Jefferson project or the COVID-19 expenditures? Move on to our tort claims. We do have 2 of those. Motion to forward those to our liability carrier. Motion's made. Any further discussion? Did we get a second? We did not.
I will second.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. Any further comments? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0 on that.
Just to clarify, there were 3, not 2, to be reflected in minutes.
I haven't seen 2. So just at that point of clarification, there were 3 tort claims that we forwarded on. Moving into our public events, we have 3 different situations, one at the park, one in Lucille Sadler Room, and then one at the courthouse. I don't believe any of those individuals are here. I think that's largely due to the building mostly being closed. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look at these and then determine what steps we want to take. The request to use the courthouse square is for the middle of July. That's July 11th. And that comes from a group affiliated with Martinsville Baptist Tabernacle. They've completed the application, filled out a narrative, also provided a certificate of liability insurance. There's a second event requesting use of the Lucille Sadler Room for a personal event. That person has also, applicant Wendell Bentley has also completed the application and provided liability insurance. And then the third one, I have just a couple of additional pieces of information on. This was submitted by the Barbara B. Jordan YMCA. At first, when I first connected them with Deb, I was under the impression that they were organizing a fundraiser, when in fact what they are doing is simply wanting to use Waverly Park at the end of July, and Burkhart Creek Park at the end of August, as to publicize the importance of exercise and running. And this is something that you probably will be aware of. They have actually done in the last couple of years on park property. So probably in hindsight, that was probably not an event that really needed a formal application per se. They're not charging any registration fees or anything of that nature. So with that, those are the 3 events that we have. I'd open up for any questions or discussion and then potential approval on these as the board sees fit.
Go ahead and make a motion, we approve all 3. The first one being the event on the courthouse square. Basically, the sponsor is Morgan County Baptist Tabernacle, Pastor Zempel. The second one being Wendell Bentley for the Lucille Sadler Meeting Room. And I believe that's for a baby or a wedding shower. And then the third one being the Barbara Jordan YMCA for their 5K walks, one being in July for Waverly Park, one being in August for Burkhart Creek that they've done in the past.
We have a motion on the floor to approve all 3 of those events. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion?
normally don't open it up to private people, this building up to people for private events. So this is like a first. So if you're going to approve that, do you want, like a maintenance person here to open it and to lock up and to stay here during the event? And if so, that would be more than likely overtime at time and a half. How do you do that?
I know before they've done the same room and the son-in-law, his mother or some people is cool. That's all I can tell.
If it's an employee, we opened that, but that wasn't how that was presented, that wasn't mentioned.
Well, I know they've been in here before, that's why I told them to get out of here. Cause they called me and I said, well, you didn't talk to your mother? And I said, well, you need to go with them, she can give you the application.
Okay.
That's exactly what I did, but I know it's Tammy's, Chase's mother, I do know that.
Before we're done, the employee will take responsibility for cleaning up and locking up, unlocking and.
Yeah, and if she won't take the responsibility, I'll take the responsibility myself. I mean, I don't have a problem with that with this family. But I mean, yeah.
I appreciate that. I was kind of operating on the assumption that it was an employee issue, but that's a good point. So perhaps with the approval, we can just verify those particular details.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Any other questions or discussion? This will probably take a separate motion. I'll go ahead and mention it now. On the Barbara B. Jordan YMCA, would like for us to consider not charging a fee for that, given the fact that it's not a traditional park usage, as in like renting a gazebo for the wedding or something of that nature, and it would be consistent with what we did for Relay for Life. But again, that would probably require a separate motion. Right now, we have a motion on the floor to approve all three of the events with the discussion about verifying the maintenance and locking up pursuant to the bridal shower event, and the second has been made. Any other comments? All those in favor of approval signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And then just following up on affirming on the Barbara B. Jordan, both as a nonprofit and due to the nature of what they're doing, if we could have a motion affirming that we would not charge them a fee.
Go ahead and make a motion that we approve the Barbara Jordan YMCA with no cost to them, and they are a 501c3.
Motion to waive the fee for the park due to the nonprofit status. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Our final item of business are minutes from May 4th, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve is made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And then any other business that needs to come before the board? Tony, you just can't stay away.
I just missed you guys already. I did have one point that came up to me late from the highway superintendent, that didn't make the agenda. We just want to, we're asking for permission. There's a trailer that we have, he found that we like to purchase for about $3,500. We still have a little over $18,000 left. That was over budgeted for equipment that we were purchasing earlier through the pickup trucks. We just want the permission to move forward. This is what we're planning to do. By the next commission meeting, we'll have all the appropriate paperwork. Like I said, looks like we have about $18,000 in the budget for essentially this line item, and this trailer will be about $3,500. So we just looking for the permission, yes, go ahead and get the paperwork started at least to get approval from the commission to actually purchase.
My personal thoughts would be that the department head generally knows what they need and don't need, and if it's budgeted, I don't have a problem with it. Did anybody else feel differently?
Are you getting rid of one of the trailers or just an additional trailer?
This will be an additional trailer, that'll actually be for the skid steer. So they're,
Tandem axle?
yep.
Sounds like you have a consensus.
So I'll get, thank you very much.
Are you sure you're done?
Let me just get away before I take something else.
Anything else that needs to come before the board up here or in the audience? Motion to adjourn has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is adjourned, or meeting is adjourned until June 1.
This is National EMS Week this week, so thank you to the EMS.
Thank you, Sheriff.
See you when it's got down trouble. For Triton, right? If not, like,